And this is going to be a good 90-minute experience. I have met these individuals over the course of a couple of years and have been smitten and intrigued by their stories, by their success, by their effectiveness as leaders. I want them I don't want to take any time away from them, so I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves and tell a little bit of their highlight reels, and then we're going to have some questions here. And I want to acknowledge, I saw him earlier somewhere, Dr. Shannon Falk, who is our General Secretary of Lay Ministry. Oh, there he is. Who's arrived, and also Dr. Orr Spraggin, who is our Christian Index Editor, General Secretary. Is there anybody else that's from our connectional leadership that is here that we did not see earlier? All right, thank you so much. So let's dive right in. I'm going to see, Dr. Panay Woods, who is our Chief Administrative Officer for the Christian Methodist Episcopal Church. Please wave. And she is the reason why we're at this hotel. So if it's good, give her praise. If it's not, I'm just joking.
Blame you.
Just joking. So if we can, let's start with Attorney Alvin Pittman. Full transparency, I call him mentor. He's one of my mentors. We've had a fast relationship, but we now call each other family. So I just want you to share a little bit of your story, how you became who you are. Many people will not know, but this gentleman, I'm not going to embarrass him, but he's literally larger than life. So let's hear a little bit about Mr. Alvin Pittman.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. My story is rooted in my faith. I'm born in a rural North Carolina area, born into poverty, and some people say that you have to be knocked down to just reach out and grab faith. But nah, you can be born into circumstances that make you hold on to something. And that's me, born into circumstances that made me believe in a power greater than me. And it propelled me. It's been the source of my strength throughout life. At graduation from high school, not having any money, I talked a bank into lending me money when it was the first time I'd ever been to a bank, and I had no banking relationships, nor did my parents. And so I talked the bank manager into extending me. I asked for a $2,000 loan to get to college. When I walked out, I had a $4,000 loan guarantee. It wasn't me, but it was someone assisting me, and my life has been rich with that kind of assistance. Made it through law school, embarked upon a career as a lawyer, and it's served me well because of my beginning. I am today the person that I started to be at birth, and reared into that strong belief that as long as I do my part and talk to my father, my true father, all would be okay, and it served me well. So that's who I am. I try cases. I try and help people at all walks of life today. But I know who I am. I know from where I've come, and I see people around me that need assistance, and I'm never divorced from reaching out to others, trying to recognize in them their needs and trying to assist them as well. My success is not mine because of me, it's because of him. So So that's just a brief introduction. I don't know how deep you want me to go because you want everybody to be introduced. I could talk about some risk that I've taken to move forward to get to where I am. But I think that in all of our lives, we have to make a plan, step out on faith, talk to, if you believe in prayer, pray on it, and then emerge from prayer showing your faith by believing that the Almighty will do his part. All you have to do is do yours. And that's led me through my life. And I turn it back over to the bishop.
So we're going to talk about some of those cases that you won in a few minutes.
Okay.
I wanted to hear from George Fatheree. He has an amazing story. Just now, George, I'm going to tee you up in this context. Tell us what you want us to know. Then if I don't hear certain things, I'm going to tease it out of you. How about that?
That sounds fair. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. I get to speak a lot. I don't get to speak in front of a group of folks with your background. So I'm going to share in a little bit different way. And what I want to start by sharing is, as Alvin was speaking, who, by the way, is also an important mentor and family member to me. But as Alvin opened and he talked about his faith, what I want to share is, I remember being a kid in high school. I shared a room with my brother. I slept on the top bunk. And I remember going to bed each night, and the prayer that I would say almost every night throughout high school was God, help me to become great so that I can lead and set an example. I remember that was my mantra, and that's what I asked for. And then life happened. So I grew up, also rural. I grew up in a town called Chino. It's about an hour, thank you, about an hour or so east of here. And when I say I grew up in Chino, people say, I know Chino, that's in upstate California where they got the university. I say, no, that's Chico. And they say, oh yeah, that's right, I know Chino, that's where Snoop lives and the Ball brothers are from. And I say, no, that's Chino Hills. I grew up in Chino. Right. And when I grew up in Chino, Chino's different today, but when we grew up there were more cows than people. There were two things in Chino when I grew up there. And I know whoever gave the shout out, they know what I'm talking about. So it's the largest dairies in the state of California were in Chino. You knew when you were driving by Chino because you had to roll up the windows. And then second largest prison in the state was in Chino, California Institute for Men. So that's where I grew up. Everybody I knew growing up, their dad was a dairy farmer or a prison guard. I went from Chino to Harvard University. I was the first person in my high school, public high school, Chino High School, first person in my high school to go from Chino to Harvard. And that was disorienting for a bunch of reasons. I had never been in a city, right? In Cambridge, Boston, those are big cities. I'd never seen taxis and buildings. I had never been around the seasons, and I hadn't been exposed to that type of weather, and I didn't have a coat, and that was, I really, I didn't know my father growing up. He left when I was 5. I was raised by a single mom, white lady, Polish American. And so I had never been around black people, really. But by far the most disorienting aspect of going to Harvard from Chino was I had never known anybody with any money. I had never known anybody with any wealth. And I remember the flight. I took the flight from Ontario Airport to Boston. The cheapest flight was a red eye with a layover. So that's a flight I was on, a red eye with a layover, nothing worse. We stop in Chicago, and folks get on the plane, and a woman, young lady sits down next to me, and we talk a little bit, and I realize, oh, this is going to be one of my classmates. She's going to Harvard also. She's going to be a freshman class, and she's very, kind of very well put together with the hair and the makeup and the bag, and she's talking. I'm exhausted. She's talking the whole trip. We land in Boston. She turns to me and she says, oh my goodness, I'm so embarrassed. I've been talking this entire trip about myself. I haven't asked you anything. Tell me, where does your family summer? That was her question. The first time I had ever heard the word summer used as a verb was, where does my family, and I was like, the Chino YMCA? I don't know what I'm supposed to say to this. So I want to be clear. I do summer now. I just want to be clear about that. But the point was, I went to Harvard and I worked my butt off, right? And I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with it, but I knew that I recognized that this was a unique opportunity, and opportunities like this don't happen to folks with my background. And so kind of my mantra going through is like, I'm going to get my money's worth. I'm going to learn kind of everything that I can. I graduated from Harvard. I did a handful of different things. I was a consultant for a while. I started an internet company when that was the thing to do. I ended up leaving the private sector because my firstborn son, when he was born, he developed a very rare intellectual disorder where he was having hundreds of seizures every day. Made it tough to be on the road with that consulting career. So I left consulting and decided to pivot and work in public education reform. And so I ran the California Charter Schools Association as the chief operating officer for several years, and decided to go back to school at night to get my legal degree, to get my JD. Never expected to practice, but knew that, like, I saw lawyers, I saw people like Al, and knew like I wanted what they had. And so I went back to law school at night. Never expected to practice. I was loving working in public education reform. But I ended up falling in love with law school. I ended up doing very well in law school. So the dean called me in one day, and the dean said, hey, what are you going to do when you graduate? And I told him, I said, I'm doing it. I'm like, we're building quality public schools in black and brown neighborhoods that have not had access to quality public education in decades, if not generations. And he nodded, and he said, look, he said, no one's ever going to really take you seriously as a lawyer unless you go and you get some experience working at a law firm. And, so I asked him where he thought I should go, and he told me, and I ended up going there. But the deal that I made with myself and the deal I made with my family was, I'm going to do this for 2 years. I'm going to keep my head down. I'm going to learn as much as I can. But by my third year, if I am not focused on issues that are important to me and my family, then I'm going to bounce. And I ended up being in big law for 17 years, so that 2 turned into 17. And what I realized early on was that being a lawyer and working in big law, for me, it was a great platform to support a bunch of stuff that was important to me and my family. It was great to leverage those resources. So I'm going to mention 2 of the cases that I had the chance to be involved with, and then I'm going to let you know, I've left the law and let you know what I'm doing now. But about 10 years into my legal career, I had the opportunity to lead a bankruptcy case. Now, I'm not a bankruptcy lawyer, and this bankruptcy case involved intellectual property, and I'm not an intellectual property lawyer, but it was a bankruptcy case involving intellectual property in Chicago. I'm also not a Chicago lawyer, but I got the chance to lead the case, and this was the rescue of the Ebony and Jet Photography magazine archive. 4.5 million photographs, only about 900,000 have ever been seen. 4.5 million photographs that were up for bankruptcy auction. And I represented a group of nonprofits, the Ford Foundation, MacArthur Mellon, and the J. Paul Getty Trust, to save that photography archive. It's priceless, right? Irreplaceable. And I led that transaction, and I could talk more about how I had that opportunity. When I got back from Chicago, back to LA, I got an email from a friend who told me about a different case that I learned about and was concerned about, and maybe we'll talk more about this in the Q&A, but I ended up representing pro bono, so no charge, but I represented the great-great-grandsons of Charles and Willa Bruce, who were the founders of Bruce's Beach in Manhattan Beach, California. And I represented that family 3 years pro bono, and on July 28th, 2022, for the first time in U.S. history, to this day still the only time in U.S. history, the government returned land to a black family after it had been taken. And we can hopefully talk a little more about that, but after that case, I ended up leaving the law. I've started a company now that's focused on really closing the wealth gap through an innovative approach to home ownership, where we work with employers and we try to encourage employers to support their employees around housing, emergency housing advances, and down payment assistance loans and savings accounts. So that's what I'm doing now, but it's as I've gone through my life's journey, it's been it hasn't been like a clear and a straight line. It's been opportunities that have presented themselves where I've felt ready and have felt called, and and I think it's been that calling that I talked about that I was praying for on the top bunk. So as I'm going forward through it's not all in a straight line. What's nice though is as I look back behind it, it's clear how this is all part of, as you said, a higher plan. So that's a little bit about my background. I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. So Lorna, tell us a little bit about you. So let me give you context. So out of these three individuals, she's a CME.
Yes.
I didn't meet, actually I did meet you at Phillips
Okay.
Metropolitan, Hartford, Connecticut. Unbeknownst to me, I remembered it afterwards, but I was doing me then, preaching all over the place, and I came to preach, I think, and teach at your church, and that's when we met some years ago when Bishop Walker was pastoring at that time. She has crazy stories. Some of the individuals you see in the media today, she mentored, like Queen Latifah, Jay-Z, etc. But Lorna, tell us a little bit about you.
Hello, everyone. I was laughing because I was like, I hope he's not going to share all of that. But,
Yeah.
but I'm glad to be here. And as I was listening to you two speak, it made me change a little bit about what I wanted to share, because actually sitting here in Los Angeles, California, I never thought I would have been here. As you said, I've lived, it's 7 years. Just this past weekend is when I came to California. And I have to tell you a little bit about how I got here for you to understand how God has been orchestrating surprises in my life for many years. I had a friend of mine who sent me an email. So I was in Connecticut. I was happy, had a comfortable living. My husband and I, my children are growing up, had a home, and things are good. And a friend of mine sent me an email that said, Lorna, this is your job. This is you. I've been working for years with young families and children and helping what many would call the underdog, the underserved. And I don't like the word dog, but I wanted you to get an understanding of what people categorize people who are trying to get to the next level. I want to fight for that person who is trying to get to the next level. So I'm working with these families, and she sends me this email, and it's everything that I do. It's great. It's an expansion. It's scaling up. Then I get to the bottom of the email, and it says, Los Angeles, California. I sent it back to her. I said, this can't be for me because it's in Los Angeles, California. Truly. Went home to my husband, briefly talked about it, but we really put it aside because we're happy. Our family, our supports are in the East Coast. We're happy. And I tell this, and I could tell this, I've told it to other people, but I'll definitely tell it to a room of faith-filled people. About a week later, I was in my email. And you know how emails work, right? They go down, 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 the newest one on the top. Down, down, down. On the top of my email, which came a week before, that email is there again. Same email. She didn't resend it. Let's be clear. So I start reading it, and I look at it, and this is 100% accurate truth. Holy Spirit convicted me and said, who gave you the authority to decide where your blessings may lie? Wow. Clear as day. Those were the exact words. Who gave you the authority? Because I pushed it right aside. I'm not coming to California. I don't know. I knew one person here. One person. Anyway, long story short, I won't take you through but husband and I talked. I cried. I said, I'm not going to be disobedient. Let's just apply. Let's see what happens. At least I took, the step. I'm starting with this firm. They're talking to me. Little by little, it keeps moving forward. Each time it's St. Anne's Family Services is the name of the organization. And they say, we'll talk to them and we'll get back to you because we're working with a search firm. Every time, I'm moving next to the next step. Finally, they say, we want to fly you out to Los Angeles. My husband and I looking at each other like, okay, what's happening here? Next thing you know, we want to fly you and your husband out because we want to make sure this is it. They say it was down to 2 people. Wow. Come to find out, 100 people applied. Wow. I didn't know all of this until after. They said the final step is a presentation. you have to make a presentation to the board, but it's between two people. We came in, we did the presentation, it went well. We got a call right before my birthday and said the board unanimously selected you to lead this home for women and children and families, a program providing mental health supports, providing housing, helping young mothers, providing workforce development, and that was a miracle. My husband had a job as a high school teacher. Now we're about to leave everything to come for something I never expected. The only reason I share and say that I've been involved with surprises throughout my life and blessings is because I also have done so many things. You talk about the pieces. I never got defined by who I was in terms of my situation. I grew up in an urban area. I had both my parents in the household, but we weren't wealthy. I became a young mother. At the age of 18, I had my first child. I wasn't married, although I have since married my husband of 38 years. But I say that to say how all of that works in terms of your profession is when I became a young mother, I thought that was the worst thing that could have happened to me. I was ashamed, my family, all the things that go with that. I had grown up in the church, and so God allowed me to use that experience that I never knew would have connected to running programs for young women to show them how they can overcome.
Yeah.
So all the things that I have done have connected. When I was 30-something, and that's I'll end, I accidentally found out I was adopted. Accidentally. We got to stop keeping these secrets from our families and our children. That's a sermon for some of y'all ministers out here. Because I had no idea. I was filling out a passport for, of all things, a family reunion.
Wow.
I was born in London, just to clarify. Lived in the U.S. all my life, but I was born in London, so I had to go overseas. I'm like, what's taking so long? My cousins want to have this family reunion in Jamaica. Oh, I'm all excited. Passport's not coming. What is happening? I get a note in the mail that says, you need your birth certificate. And then when I've tried to apply for that, I got a letter in a manila envelope that I will never forget that said, certificate of adoption. I'm 32 years old.
Wow.
So I say all of that to say, once again, working with youth in foster care, working with youth who are trying to figure out why their parents may have not been able to keep them in their care, here comes that experience again and that life journey and that lived experience that connects me with the work that I didn't know that I was going to end up doing. So I say all that to say that that thread in my life of wanting to ensure that people get the best, that they have and are in spaces where they can feel empowered and seen, having young women that I've seen now become CEOs in their own right, helping young parents who have really got to understand the value of being a parent and doing the best they can with circumstances. Adding the media piece in that paralleled, always wanting to use my voice to help lift up those who feel unseen. And so yes, you have the connections with the celebrities, but my reason for that wasn't about celebrity. When I had them on my show, which we created, it was an independent show that became world known, I wanted them to talk to the young people about what they could say to them to help positive. We didn't care about the music and all of that. What can Queen Latifah say to help empower? What can Notorious Big say to help empower? And I have young people to this day, we had a Words of Wisdom segment, and those segments did something to them. I hate to say it, sometimes they don't listen to us. They want to listen to their folks, those folks on television, but at least have the folks on TV tell them something positive, and that's what it was about for us, and I'll end there.
Awesome, awesome.
Wow.
So you see we have a tapestry of gift, grace, and talent, and grit, and these three individuals who have various walks of life, but yet the single thread that I see in them is surrender, is strength, is tenacity, and more importantly, is leadership unleashed. So as we go to Mr. Al Pittman, want to just really deal with because you've had you've been very modest here, sir, but you've had a storied career. Tell us about a couple of cases that you can share that's not under any non-disclosure agreements.
Okay.
That will help us out.
Why don't I do that? I sit here senior to my left and right, but I've shrank since they told you a little bit about themselves. I've shrank in stature. So yeah, I'm a lawyer. I've done cases. I say that I take the difficult cases. Early in my career, I converted an $800 dispute into a $1.25 million verdict.
Wow.
And that was sort of the jump start, the kickoff point. $800 dispute with an insurance company on behalf of an individual whom they refused to pay, just $800. And it really is $800 more because he damaged a tractor trailer, and the insurance company paid some, but every time they go back to the shop owners, the mechanics, had found something else. So with $800 left to pay, they said no. He comes to me, I convert $800 to $1.25 million.
Wow.
Now, another difficult case was an age discrimination case. Age discrimination, the line of division is 40. Well, it's easy to take on a case for a person who's 70, 60, but when a person is 40 plus some months old and he's alleging age discrimination, he's right at the line, just past 40, it's a bit more difficult. And so I had a lawyer call on me to come into that case and assist him with it, because he says, I've been researching and I see nobody wins these cases except you. And I'd like to have you come on with me. We took that marginal age discrimination case to a $10 million dispute. There are other cases in my background that are that kind of case, but I represent the little individuals. I represent people who, without me, would have no voice. I represent workers in factories who are not being paid their full wages in class actions, North Carolina. And I practice in California, North Carolina, Florida, Michigan, New York, and Washington, D.C. I don't think I left it out. But in North Carolina, doffing and donning, I don't know if you know what that is, but it's putting on your clothes because you're required to have a special clothing in order to perform at this factory. And doffing, taking them off. So doffing and donning, putting them on, taking them off, you should be paid, but the employer wasn't compensated. And he refused to compensate. So enter Al Pittman. It's only a few minutes a day, but they're entitled to compensation. So they're entitled to be paid. And so I step in, insist that they be paid. Company tells me no. So we get it wasn't a lot of money, about $12 million, and disperse it among the employees. But funny thing about that situation was I made a recommendation that they move the time clock so that it would eliminate the problem. Yeah. I got a curse response. You don't tell my client how to run its company. 2 years later, I sued them again for the very same thing. And the CEO invited me to Chicago for a meeting saying they wanted to settle that dispute. We settled for millions, And the CEO looks across the table and says, Mr. Pittman, if you don't mind, just tell me, what can we do to avoid having to deal with you again? Yeah. I said, well, funny you ask. I told your lawyers in a statement that I wrote when we met the first time, and I happen to have a copy. Needless to say, the lawyer shrank.
Yeah.
He withered. And that was the end of their relationship, but there it was. Sometimes companies want to do the right thing, but they aren't led to do it. Now, I shared those 3 situations with you, and I keep saying, I didn't do it. I mean, there's no mastery in me. I can't talk about me without talking about him. You know, there's a room full of you who are believers, and you know that God is perfect in all things.
Yes.
Except when I play golf. Anybody out there golf? So when I play golf, I always hear my friends, they want to hit the ball straight down in that low grass called the fairway. But the ball goes out to the right to the woods. And invariably they say, God! And with every bad shot thereafter, it's God. So I'm playing with a group, and after about the 5th hole, they hit a beautiful shot. There isn't a word. Everybody in the group says, great shot.
Yeah.
So I reach over to my friend. I said, well, tell me, does God hit any good shots? Well, so my life is believing that he's perfect in all things.
Yes.
And when I do something, I give credit
Yes.
to him.
Yes.
For the good, I give credit. I don't ignore. It's not me when it succeeds and him when it goes wrong.
The opposite. It's the opposite.
Yeah. So that's a little bit about some of my cases. I primarily here's what I say. I say I'm blessed. I'm truly blessed because I came to California knowing about 2 people. And I called it the Wild Wild West. And here I am. I've been able to build a practice, to grow, never having advertised in a real sense. But my service to others has been advertisement on my behalf. And so that's who I am.
I mean, he's dropped so, come on, give it up. He's dropped so many nuggets on us. I don't know if you're catching everything that he's dropping, but he's like the gem dropper, like literally. And just full disclosure, the reason I'm playing golf today is because of him. Yeah.
And by the way, he never says that now. He gives credit, not for the bad shots, he gives credit for the good shots.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. George, I want to throw this out at you. This is a question, and we got good time because I want to leave the last 30 minutes for you all to ask questions of these phenoms in their own right. We haven't really even tapped the surface of who they really are. I'm grateful to have really a bird's eye view into their insight, the way they think. We're in constant communication on a lot of levels for various reasons. Some of you all are benefactors of it, don't even know it. But want to deal with this strategic risk-taking. Risk-taking is a hallmark of innovators. Rich, bold, risky moves stand out in your leadership journey as a defining moment. We just heard one from Lorna. What safety nets or contingency plans, if any, did you put in place to manage the potential fallout? All of you all have had some kind of risk that you took on behalf of your family, on behalf of your calling, your profession. What safety nets, if any? I know Al has a story. He has this mantra. I can't call it right now. I think you might know what I'm talking about. But what are some safety nets that you put in place? Say it doesn't work out.
Do you want to say your safety net mantra first?
No.
So I'm gonna take the question a little differently, but I want to talk about how I think about risk taking, and I want to go back and share a little bit more about when I was describing the Ebony Jet archive case, and you remember what I said is that was a Chicago-based intellectual property focused bankruptcy proceeding. And I'm a California-based real estate attorney, so I got nothing to do with this. The issue was, I don't always talk about this, but with this group, the issue was, at the time, I was the only African-American partner at the firm. And the firm got the call from the client that the client needed representation on this. And this was not like trying to acquire something where, hey, if you don't get the office building, it's okay, you can get another office building. Or if you don't, kind of win on this, you can win an appeal. This was only going to happen one time in history, that this invaluable archive would be put up for auction. And if the right parties did not successfully acquire it, right? And my clients, their goal was they wanted to acquire this for preservation, right? That's what the J. Paul Getty Trust does, is they preserve, invaluable pieces of art, invaluable kind of works of art. That's what they wanted to do. They wanted to acquire this to preserve it in perpetuity for public access and scholarly study. And some of the other people bidding at the auction, right, were interested in the images for marketing. They want to, take some iconic photos, sell some, some tennis shoes, and who would know what would happen with the rest of the archive. So this was not, like, the margin for error on this was zero. There were also a lot of optics that had to be managed, and one of the optics was this is like a prized, African-American treasure, and we've got a white firm and a white leading client. And so I got put on the project, not to lead the project. I got put on the project as kind of window dressing on this. And when I talk about this, what I tell people is it was my, they had said, hey, we want you to join the project. Like, don't worry, we're going to get a bankruptcy partner and an intellectual property partner and a core, but why don't you just fly to Chicago while we put the team together? And so I got on a plane, I flew out to Chicago. They said, just like do some diligence and look in the data room and look at the document. And so I pull the document down, I start reviewing it, and I start to see some patterns. Like, hey, this agreement looks a lot like some of these real estate deal agreements I'm working on. And so I made some comments, and I had an idea about, like, well, if we structure this a little bit differently, we could probably save a ton on the tax side, which would give us. So I started having ideas, and I called and told them, and they said, yeah, that's a good idea. And they said, just keep doing that. We're working and getting the team. Anyways, to fast forward, we had 72 hours to get this deal done before the auction was closed. And by the second day, I realized they're not sending other people. The second day, I realized this is my deal. This is my deal to get done. And what I thought of, and how I try to explain this to people, it was my Tracy Chapman moment. I don't know if people know this about Tracy Chapman, but she dropped her first album, 1988, sold like 200,000 copies. She had never, she performed, actually, going back to Harvard, she performed like Harvard Square, like coffee shops in Cambridge and Boston. 1988, there was a concert in Wembley in London, and it was to celebrate Nelson Mandela's 70th birthday. He was in prison still, but it was an anti-apartheid concert to celebrate Nelson Mandela's 70th birthday. It was an all-day music festival, and they had a ton of bands, and there were different stages, and like U2 performed, and like UB40, and Stevie Wonder was going to headline. Tracy Chapman had been invited, and she played at 3 o'clock in the afternoon at like a far peripheral stage. She did 3 songs. So you're going into the evening, and you're getting ready for the headliner, and what they discovered was that when Stevie's plane landed, there was a piece of equipment that didn't make it off the plane. I don't know what it was, but it was a technology piece of equipment that let him control the music in the band. So he refused to go on. He said, I'm not going to go on without this. So they're scrambling to find another headline act. But the thing is, with the time, you can't get a band that's got equipment that you got to move and set up. You need like somebody who can just go up there. Tracy Chapman plays the acoustic guitar.
Right.
Right? Does not get like easier than that. She had done 3 songs before, had not performed Fast Car. So they say, hey, we're going to put you up. Do you have any songs that you haven't played before? We don't want you to repeat. She goes, I got this song, Fast Car. She went up there. She sang Fast Car. 60 million people watched that concert. She sold 200 million albums after that concert. Like, she was prepared. And so it's what I tell my 18-year-old, right? And it's been my journey.
That's good.
Like, we don't control the opportunities that get put in front of us. We've got no control over that. What we can control is when that opportunity gets put on our plate, are we prepared to take advantage of it?
That's good.
Right? And in my personal life and in my professional career and training, I told you when I went to Harvard, right? What I was aware of was like, guys like me don't get chances like this, and so I'm going to get my money's worth. I'm going to like do every class. I'm going to go see every speaker. When I started at the law firm, my attitude was, I'm only going to be here 2 years, so I got to get my money's worth. I got to go quick. I got to say yes to everything. I got to get the experience. And the message for me was, this path we're on, somebody knows where we're going, but it's not always us.
Yeah.
What we can do is, when we get there, be prepared to perform.
Yep. Amen.
That's amazing.
Fantastic.
So preparation is the key. You cannot have enough preparation. You know, most of us like to wing it, especially the preachers, especially on Saturday night when you've been doing whatever you've been doing all week. And then at 6 o'clock, you're like, I got to say something tomorrow. Right? And then for those who are gifted, you rely on your hoop to get you through. Right? Ain't he all right? Right? Right. But if you're prepared, it doesn't matter what moment comes in front of you, you'll be able to execute it. That's an amazing story.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. Lorna, did you have a contingency?
Yes, to a certain degree, but not really. I think, in my work and in my profession, I'm always, have a backup and contingency plan. My staff knows that. But in this situation, especially with moving out here, you talk about being a CMA. I know the pastors have to move at certain times, but that's something that everyone isn't used to.
Right.
And so knowing that when you're all in your profession, sometimes you have to take risk even in your family.
Yes.
So, my husband had a thriving career as a high school educator, and I didn't want to take the risk right away of coming to something very new. And, I said, we've never been apart more than 2 weeks for vacation in 30-something years.
Wow.
And it was like, I came first. And he stayed back with our family and just, that was hard. And I'm sharing this part of it because I think it was important to, first of all, acknowledge that he was like, you got to do this, go ahead. He always has my back, always supports, and knew that this was something that God wanted me to move ahead with. And so the contingency plan to a certain degree was like, okay, well, you'll stay at the house. We won't sell the house yet. Mm-hmm. We'll wait and see how it works. But that was a sacrifice. And so, as I look out today, I think about the fact that that was a risk and there was some contingency plan, but we went full force. And of course, he came here and we moved on and things are doing great. But I did the best that I could. When you talked about being in the environment and being ready, that Tracy Chapman moment, no matter where I've worked, even as an intern out of college, wherever I went, I did the best that I could. I've had so many experiences where I was an intern coming out of college. I was working it was called 211, and then they've changed the name, United Way, all the different things. They said, you're the first person we ever offered a full-time job to coming out of college. I remember that to this day. Why? Yes, it was, of course, the Lord, but because I did everything I could. I didn't see it as, oh, this is just a little internship. I'm just biding time until I get to. I never approached things that way. And I continued to do that. And so where I was, even before coming to St. Anne's, was a smaller version of St. Anne's. But it was clear that I was doing all I could. I did it for the young women and the children. It wasn't about a paycheck, because you all know nonprofits don't pay like that, okay? You do know that, right? So it's mission-led. Yeah. So doing that and setting up and saying, okay, I'm gonna move forward and take this risk, you know, me leading an organization that has been predominantly led by men, although they're women-serving organizations. 117 years, it had been led by men, and I'm not only the first woman, I'm the first Black woman. But it goes, but I only share that because it's important with the preparation. It's important to do your best and not overlook where you are in this moment, because when that opportunity comes up, you are prepared and ready. So when I sat and talked with maybe some of these artists, I'm not afraid to get in a boardroom and talk with presidents of all kinds of funders and foundations. I've talked with everybody already. I've sat down on my own terms. So I know you're asking about contingency plan, but I just said, if the Lord brought me to it, he was gonna bring me through it.
All right. But I do hear a theme in your monologue, and the theme is sacrifice. That your contingency plan was sacrifice. That even though your spouse is here today, but then he was there on another side of the country.
3,000 miles away.
While you were here. That's a major sacrifice. I know about that because that's how me and Michelle's relationship started. It was almost bi-coastal. And then some things happened to speed it up, but that's not this session. But I want to, Al, do you remember there's an adage you said that somebody gave you a case before you went to a firm, and that was an adage that you said. Told me some time ago. I don't know if you remember it or not.
Can't remember.
Okay. All right. Good. Good.
I just say, as relates to the topic, you have a vision, you put plan to the vision, then you pray on the plan, throw yourself all in with respect to what you've planned, and you reduce the risk substantially. Then you have to really go out on faith and pursue it. That's what I say about doing your part. You've been given the vision, you've formulated the plan, you've prayed on it. God's heard your prayer and will do his part. Now it's up to you. And there is no failure when you step out in that way, because what happens is, if you think that you don't achieve the goal that you've set or the end that you've set, all you're doing is misanalyzing. God's pushed you into another direction. And you embrace that and make it a success. So that's sort of.
Yeah. Love it, love it, love it. Let me shift the conversation a little bit because, again, all of you in your various ways have found success, right? Have found effectiveness, have created legacies. What I want to deal with is what have you learned in the context, do you mentor someone now or have many mentors? And how do you feel like you can pass on what you've learned to the next wave of leaders? Anybody can jump in at any given moment, and after this question, we're going to open it up for Q&A for the rest of this aggregation that makes up the Next Level Conference.
So early in my career, I started, well, actually, my little hometown started to recognize me with an Alvin L. Pittman Day. And it was a day where the youth and the community came out to celebrate me. And I said, well, you know, why can't we change that and make it, if we're gonna make it about me, okay, I'll accept that, but let's make it the Alvin L. Pittman Youth Weekend. And let's do this. Let's get, in my community, having kids leave their communities was a big thing. Go on a trip to another city, another town, another state. During the summers, I said, why can't we give them that kind of opportunity? Why can't I fund that? And why can't I fund, you know, a lot of them didn't have school equipment and clothing. And I said, why can't I fund that? And let's make the summer about them. Let's get them, let's elevate their quality of life. And I thought that would make me feel better with your saying Alvin L. Pittman, I'm signing my name to it. So it started small with about 30 or 40 kids, and it ended about 400 kids. And I provide to make certain that they had field trips during the summer because, as I said, that was a big thing as a child to get 50 cents to go from my hometown on the Trailway bus to the next town. That was a huge thing for me. That was big. Mm-hmm. And I thought so many, I knew my environment and I knew how important something like that would be for them. So I do that. I did that for about 30 years and graduated to other things. And I work with both of you on in organizations that mentor children, mentor youth, because who are we if we're not giving back? So that's our past.
That's amazing.
I would say that it's interesting because as CEO of organizations where young people have lived there, it's a daily expression. I don't believe, you know, the mentorship just works only by a formal program. They were watching everything that I did and said.
Yeah.
They watched everything
Yeah.
that the staff did and said. And that's why it was so important that I always fashioned and modeled my way in a manner that would help them get to the next level. Because it's hard if you think about working with some youth who have been through a lot of trauma. They've been through the foster care system, and you think about the fact that sometimes, unfortunately, even their own family hasn't been able to show and provide love and appropriate and safe guidance. They're looking at us for that.
Right.
And so to do that daily, I remember I was blessed and fortunate once again coming here, all the things that have happened since then. I don't know if any of you saw, they did an episode of LA Stories on me with Giselle Fernandez. And the reason I bring that up, I told her the story about a young woman in our parking lot one day. She was driving, she was pushing a stroller through. And sometimes you talk to young people, they listen to you for different reasons, but sometimes other things catch their eye. And so I was going to get in my car, and she looked. And I said, hey, how you doing? You know, I'm always speaking to the young women because I do believe in engagement with the people that you work on behalf of. She said, Miss, I like your car. And I said, you do? I said, well, you know what? I can save this parking space for you, and you too can have this car at one point. And she looked at me like, what? And I expressed to her what I had done to get here and to share that I had the similar journey to her, that I was a young mom, but I went to school, I got my degree, I worked really hard, I stayed focused, and this is accessible to you. And her little eyes were just like, what? And so for me, sometimes it's just the simple things,
Right.
meeting them where they're at.
Right.
What appealed to them? I'm not a materialistic person. That wasn't about it. But for her, that caught her eye, like, you can get something by doing something appropriate, help serving folks. Yes. Mentorship for me, every week I have supervision with my leadership team. Takes a lot of time. But every single week I have supervision, and our supervision isn't just going over what needs to be done. It is actually a level of mentorship session. We're talking about what can change or how can things happen. I also believe in reverse mentorship, where you're talking and getting feedback from those who are within the organization that give you support and guidance because you learn from that next generation.
Absolutely.
So for me to see CEOs who are now, that were working under me, are CEOs now, young people who are running counseling programs. I look back east and I seen a young woman that was in the program. She's running her own counseling organization. For me, it's living your life in a way that they can see. Because I work in a nonprofit social services environment, yes, I do mentoring as well with our Links organization and other things, but I work in a setting where it's day to day. And even though I'm in my CEO office, I believe in going down and connecting and engaging and talking with them. And that's been something that some people have found odd, that I can connect culturally, that I can talk to them, that I can even join in the line dance sometimes when they're having the little events. Miss Lorna, you know that? Now, I don't know this Texas new one that they have. But I do know Tamia's. I know that one. But the fact that I can sit in a boardroom and talk about all the KPIs and all the different things, but then turn around and walk downstairs and jump in a line dance or have a conversation with them, it's that cultural flexibility that not everybody has. But mentorship, live it, and let them see who you are, and they do that.
Awesome, awesome. George, if you want to respond, and then we're going to open it up for some Q&A, because I know you all have a ton of questions that you want to ask.
So both at the law firm as well at the law school. So when I graduated law school, I taught there for a few years, and the mentorship component of interacting with peers and young people has always been very attractive to me. You know, over time, I think my mentorship message has evolved, and what I share now and what I try to convey now is this concept of passion plus preparation leading to purpose, right? And that's really been the experience that I've had. And I'll go back and I'll just share another anecdote. But I remember, so I mentioned I came back from Chicago after the Ebony and Jet bankruptcy deal, and there was some nice articles around that. My name had gotten out, and I got an email from someone. It was a friend of the family who was an editor of the LA Times. She sent me an email. She said, "Hey, congratulations on the Ebony Jet deal. I want you to read the article below, and then I want to come over and I want to talk to you about it." And the article that she sent me was an article about Bruce's Beach, which I had never heard of. You know, spent the last 20 years here in Los Angeles County, had never heard of Bruce's Beach. How this African American couple had started this business in the late 1900s, 1920s, and it had been taken from them through racial animus. So I read the article, and she came over, and I remember I was angry about it. And she said to me, I think you should see if there's something you can do to help this family, have some relief, have some justice, get something back for this. And so I went back to the law firm, and I got an associate, and we spent about 4 months doing research and coming up with some legal theories. And the problem was, I didn't know anyone in the Bruce family, right? Had no idea who these folks were. I read this article. I knew who their great-grandparents were. And so we went out. I hired a genealogist. We did a family tree. Like, we knew some names in the papers, but we wanted to, again, this like preparation, right? I care about getting it right. And so I wanted to be kind of sure and clear. So I hired a genealogist. The genealogist gave me a report, and I tried to track folks down, and I sent basically like a cold call email out introducing myself and trying to get the family to talk to me. And I didn't hear anything. And about a month later, my phone rang, and I recognized the number, and it was a representative from the family. And I can't recall the exact conversation, but when we were on the phone, I remember saying something to the effect of, "I cannot guarantee that I'll be successful in helping your family get this land back. But what I promise you is you will not find another person with my personal commitment to this issue, as well as an attorney with my training, experience, and preparation to be of service to your family in this matter. And it was not until those words were coming out of my mouth that I realized, like, hey, that's actually might be true. Right? I was trying to get the business, right? I was trying to get hired. But as I said those words, I looked back at just my path, and I looked at, working in public education reform and trying to be of service to the Black and brown community. My very first pro bono case as an attorney at a firm, I was working for a Jewish lady, and I did a pro bono case where I petitioned the German government for reparations on behalf of Holocaust survivors, right? That was my first pro bono case. It made no sense that I was a real estate lawyer. Like, we didn't have real estate growing up. I hate it. So it's like, it wasn't until I said those words that I realized, like, that's actually true. And at that moment, it's a beautiful moment. And some of you with this calling, you've had it when you have that clairvoyance and that clarity that, like, I am exactly where somebody wants me to be right now. And I'm doing the exact service that I was put here to do. And so that's really the message that I try to get to my mentees, is this idea of purpose.
Absolutely.
Real quickly, so something I'm proud of, if those of you out there in the audience and in home, wherever you are, if you don't like anything I've said, one of the things I pride myself on is, in addition to practicing law and being leaders, I say if we aren't leaders delivering benefit to others, we aren't leading. And one of the things I'm proud of is I recognize special qualities and talent in others. And seated on this stage, if you don't like anything I've said and shared with you, George is an individual, a young attorney that I recognize early in our relationship, and I appointed him to a committee, and you see in him the quality of a leader. Credit me with that. And
it's good mentorship.
And to my left,
it's good mentorship.
And to my left, your bishop and all our bishop, I saw in him special qualities beyond his leadership as a man of faith. I saw in him other special qualities, and I sponsored him in a group because I saw in him that leadership quality that makes us stronger. So credit me with that.
Yeah. He is absolutely right. And I've been blessed to not only have an Al Pittman in my life, but to be on the stage with these three amazing individuals. Come on, let's give God praise for them. So we have about a good 25-ish of minutes. I know you all have some burning questions. Now let's give little ground rules on how we're going to do questions. All right. It has to be a question. All right? No statements, no sermonettes, no legacy statements, a question. All right. And a question directed at them about leadership. All right. So our amazing event team have mics ready, but please stand. I saw Reverend Chris Jackson, who is a leader phenom in his own right, but he has a question. I'm not sure what he's going to ask, but we'll see.
First of all, thank you. Absolutely amazing presentations, just phenomenal. I'm Pastor Chris Jackson, Curry Temple, CME Church of Compton, California. And I see some of my amazing fraternity brothers up there on the dais. I'm amazed at watching you and hearing the stories that have come there. Question, what's your biggest regret?
That's a great question. What is your biggest regret? All right. And then the next question will come from Dr. Thurman, but what is your, Pittman and Fatheree, he's an archon as well, the guy that's holding the mic. So I want you to know that.
Yeah.
From Savannah.
That's a hard question. And for me, the reason I say that is because, like I said before, every experience, even the challenging ones, have brought me to where I am today. And I don't believe in failure. I believe in learning lessons from those moments. And so, you know, I can't find the moment that I could say is the biggest regret. Not that I haven't had moments. I just can't find one big one. Let's just say I've grown to trust in myself even more. And maybe I'll answer it this way in terms of, I think about, I'm someone that gives 100%. And this is going to be an interesting leadership perspective, seeing that I'm a CEO and want folks to give their all. But I will say this, I've been having this saying that I've been saying lately is, in business, in leadership, in so many ways, people love you till they don't love you anymore. I'm going to put it on a shirt, by the way. Seriously, and where I've come to this is that I'm the type of person that will give my all. I do my best in every setting to the best of my ability. But I've also learned that you give some, but you have to hold just a tiny bit for yourself. Yeah. And we don't talk about that. Yeah. You have to keep just a little bit for yourself. And the reason I say that is because when you see people feeling extremely either burnt out or challenged in certain ways, or when they get laid off or certain things happen, is because they feel like, but I gave you my all. Yeah. That doesn't mean you don't do an amazing job. It doesn't mean you don't do preparation. I want to say that I've been in situations in the past where I've gave more than 150%. And I see possibly that it wasn't received fully. And so I've learned that in business and in environments, I'm going to give my all, and we should. Right. But you got to hold just a little bit back so that you don't walk away feeling as if that it wasn't reciprocated, maybe. I give my all to God, but I'm not giving my all to, you know.
Awesome.
So let me tell you my biggest regret. I'm 6th grade, and I'm given 50 pages to learn. I'm going to be Abraham Lincoln. And at this time, I'm very introverted. I was a shy kid. You couldn't get a word out of me, although I was an A student. I was given the 50 pages on Friday, told that we were to learn our parts. Mine was 50 pages. I went home over the weekend and I didn't go out to play. I learned the 50 pages. On Monday, the teacher says, okay, let's rehearse. It's rehearsal time. And she has all people gather and where is your paper? Get your papers, get your parts, get your parts. And I don't have a paper. And she is flabbergasted. She is just frustrated with me. Why don't you have your paper? You know it's going to be rehearsal. Here, use mine. I said, but you told us to learn it. And she looked, her eyes nearly fell out of her head. You mean you learned it? And I said, yeah, you told us to learn it. You told me to learn my part. And she said, Alvin, you're so bright. But if you don't speak up, nobody's ever going to know it.
That's a good.
That resonated with me.
That's good.
And it brought me out of that quiet, shy person. And I regret that I didn't come out of it years earlier so that I could speak that voice and let people hear my voice. My siblings say it's their biggest regret because they hate the teacher ever told me that.
That is it.
Now you all see why I say he's larger than life.
Yes.
George.
Yeah, you know, the regrets I have are the not taking bigger risks. You know, not taking bigger risks. I think I love what you say when you say, you said it so eloquently, that, you know, the words like, you know, who are you to have the audacity to not like use your gifts? How? And I think we've all, you know, we all doubt ourselves and we doubt what we're capable of. We doubt like that we can fully possess and express His glory. And yeah, there's been career moments where there was a bigger risk to take. There was another opportunity to try to set something right, and I didn't have the courage to kind of stand up and do it. So professionally, I'll tell you personally, my regret is, you know, I've been married 31 years this year. We got married 5 years after we met. The second I saw that woman, I knew she was going to be my wife, and I regret that it took me 5 years to kind of get it together. So, but that's on the personal side. But yeah.
Dr. Thurman.
Yes, thank you so much for this phenomenal discussion. My question is, beyond your faith and perhaps familial relationships, could you just describe who's had the biggest influence on your career and what we now see as tremendous success?
Okay. So, okay, I'm senior on the stage, so why don't I just jump in there?
Right.
I've just told you about the 6th grade teacher. So at 12th, when I went to high school, 10th grade, I had an English teacher. And she put me in everything, believing that I could do anything. She had me writing poems, writing speech competitions, debating. And I told her, you know, I can do all this practicing here at school, but I can't really go places and actually compete. I said, so on nights when it's time to compete, I'm not going to be there. Why? We don't have transportation. I don't have anything to wear. She visited my home, sat on the front porch with my mom, and she said to my mom, Alvin has tremendous talent.
Wow.
He is gifted. Wow. If you would allow him to participate in these activities that I'm involving him in, Mrs. Pittman, I promise I'll get him to and from safely.
Wow.
I will take him shopping and make certain that he has the clothes with which to wear. My mom, almost in tears, said, "You think that much of Alvin? Then sure, I'll let him do it."
Wow.
And that teacher, to this day, and I still communicate. She's here in California when I need her to be. I'm there in North Carolina when she needs me to be. She had a tremendous impact on my life, so easy.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, I mentioned that, you know, I mentioned my dad bounced when I was 5. He left my mom. She had three kids, and so she raised us. And, you know, there are two things that she just instilled, you know, really in all of us. And the first is just like a unquenchable thirst for service. Remember when I was in the 6th grade. At school, we had a canned food drive, and I had never heard those words. Like, I didn't know what that was, and actually, like, the syntax was confusing me. I was like, where are the canned foods driving to? Like, I was like, maybe the cans are round, and so they're like, I had no idea what it was. It's a weird thing to call it. So I went home and she explained to me, she's like, well, there's people who don't have food to eat. And so I was like, I got it. So I remember that day we had a pantry, I cleaned it out, like took every can. And then it wasn't even a wagon, I had a wheelbarrow in the garage. And I took the wheelbarrow and I went the entire block up and down. I cleaned out every pantry at every house on our block. And she just, it was just something that was in all of us, and it wasn't like for recognition. It had nothing to do with morality. It was just something, and in the same kind of dose and in the same intensity, she instilled in all of us just again, an unquenchable intellectual curiosity. We would, like any book in the house, like we'd devour it, we'd fight over it, and it's like those kind of like the combination of that intellectual curiosity and the call to service, and it really goes back to this, what I said before about like the passion and the preparation leading to a life really of purpose. So for me, it's my mom who raised us.
That was just amazing. Give it up. We have literally a question for one. We'll do these last two. You go first, sir, and then ma'am, you go next.
Hi, my name is Cecil Harper. I attend New Hope CME Church in Evanston, Illinois. And my question is first for the lady. What are your personal thoughts of those in the entertainment industry who have a major platform, yet due to personal choices, find themselves on the wrong side of the law, a Kelly or a Diddy, etc.? And then how can we overcome their negative influence when so many value their lifestyle?
Well, so
That's our question, isn't it?
yeah, because there's a lot there. Because I'll tell you that I wasn't involved with any of those white parties or any of those things. Let me start with that.
It's called a disclaimer.
That's a disclaimer. And the reason I say that, because I actually interviewed him several times and was actually in the movie Can't Stop, Won't Stop. My interviewing with my little braids, because I was 20-something years old, and I'm next to him and Clive Davis, where I'm sharing about his business acumen. That was it.
You weren't at the party.
I was not at the party. But on a serious
No
note,
Diddy. No, Stacey, go ahead.
Yes, on a serious note, it's very disheartening to see any of these entertainers who make these choices. You got to understand, and I've always been, I don't even talk a whole lot about some of this, besides when I shared the fact that when I would have entertainers on my show, I wanted them to share the positive. I wanted them to give good and kind of sound uplifting information. But I work with women and children.
Yeah.
I work with the survivors of sex trafficking and human trafficking. I work with people, so I can't stand with anything like that, so I'll start with that. But I feel that we have to be careful with putting those people on a pedestal.
Right,
And we do that to a certain degree.
right.
Remember when I said that some of those young people would love to hear what those artists said was right and wrong more than they would their parents? Yeah. They told me this. I have letters to this day where someone said, I loved when so-and-so said X, Y, Z. That's why I wanted them to share something positive. But what I do respect is that if you do the crime, that you pay the time. And we need to be able to differentiate. People have an issue with celebrity, and they can't see that that person can do something wrong. Just because you make great music doesn't mean you can't do something immoral, illegal. People have issues with doing that with everyday folks. We hear all these great things that you do. If you did something wrong now, people would be like, oh no. And I know you would never do anything wrong. Just to clarify, this is my Link sister's husband. Seriously, we have an issue of trying to put this one thing together. People are human, and they need to be held accountable, but they also need to be able to, young people especially, it's our job to remind them they're a great singer, they're a great artist, they're a great basketball player. That doesn't mean that they're a great human.
Amen. And on that note, I hope that answered your question. Thank you. All right, Doc, take it.
Thank you. Again, thank you for this inspiring panel, and especially letting us know what black jobs are. I appreciate that. I want to ask, what do you think is required at this point in time for courageous leadership being unleashed, and what does that look like for you?
All right, and if I can give you all this cursory, because we're about 4 minutes, if you can give me a minute answer, that would be great.
Authentic leadership.
Courageous leadership.
Courageous leadership requires you to be authentic, to be who you really are, to be ethical, to stand in your truth, and be honest. I think you can't lead from a place of inauthenticity. You have to be who you are. And there's something called reckless transparency. You need to be transparent, but you don't need to be recklessly transparent.
Love it. Al.
Well, don't become comfortable, because if you're too comfortable, then you sort of disengage. And we're politically now at a time when so many of us are asking questions like, what are our leaders, our political leaders doing? Rather than asking, what are we doing? What are we doing? What are we doing in support of them? How do we accentuate their voice and their capacity to do for us that which we think they ought be doing? So I think the collective, we need to be thoughtful, visionary again, and collective in our pursuit.
Yeah, the concepts related to leadership that are most intriguing to me and that I'm most curious about are concepts that have to do with humility, and not humility like a lack of confidence or like a modesty, but being humbled, being humbled around our brothers and sisters. So it's concepts of humility and this concept of servant leadership, this concept of leading through living a life of purpose and service. I think those are attributes that we don't celebrate enough in our leaders, and I think as a result they're attributes that are lacking in some of today's leadership. So.
Can I add just one thing? You said something, it'll be 2 seconds.
All right.
I lead from a place of high support and high accountability. They go hand in hand. If you have one off, it's a problem. High accountability, you're too harsh on people and you're not supporting them. High support, you're letting them do whatever and they're not getting any goals met. High support and high accountability will help you. You have to hold that for yourself and those you work with, because it has to be both. Too many times it's imbalanced and it causes problems within organizations, any organization.
Well, let's give it up for this amazing panel. George Fatheree, Alvin L. Pittman, Lorna Little. Come on, give it up. And before you go, wherever our event team, I think you all are coming, because they came literally because I asked. It's not that I can afford none of them for this time, but because they were gracious enough to come. Wherever our event team is, we have some little things that we want to give you at this time, just to simply say thank you for this time. Let's give it up again for them as they come. This is, thus far has been an amazing day. We started off with Bishop Thomas L. Brown, and then we had a conversation with Reverend Elijah, myself, and then Dr. Thurman. We thank God for him, but let's do this. Yes, stay up here for a second. All right.
All you golfers out there, remember, give him credit for the good shots. For the good shots.
So just on behalf of the Next Level Conference in 9th Episcopal District, we want to say to you, thank you. All right? It's a blue box because he's a blue brother. All right? To Mr. Al Pittman, just want to say thank you on behalf of Next Level 9th. and to Lorna Little, because she is a woman of salmon pink and apple green.
Hello.
God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was a blast.
Appreciate it.
That was a blast.
Appreciate it. Thank you.